was a moment frozen in time. Herb Alpert, the legend behind an entire music empire, stood motionless for a heartbeat, his eyes scanning the crowd. And then he spoke. "I was wrong," he said, his words hanging in the air like an unexpected thunderclap. For words, and just like that, decades of silence shattered. That confession, it wasn't just another twist in a story. It was the unveiling of something much deeper, something that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. Karen Carpenter, the voice that captivated millions, had been silenced, not just by her struggles, but by those who had raised her up and unknowingly held her back. The man who had lifted Karen from obscurity to superstardom had also stifled her last chance. In 1979, while the Carpenters were on a hiatus, Richard Carpenter, deeply battling his own demons, stepped away. For Karen, though, this was her moment to break free. She stepped into the spotlight on her own for the first time, deciding it was time for something new. She flew to New York, teaming up with producer Phil Ramone, a man known for working with icons like Billy Joel and Barbra Streisand. Just looking to recreate her soft, comforting image, she was ready to evolve. She sought out songs that spoke to her more mature side, songs that felt deeper, more personal, tracks like If I Had You, My Body Keeps Changing My Mind, and Making Love in the Afternoon revealed a Karen that was powerful, confident, no longer hiding behind the drums or the image of a shy, sweet girl. She poured everything into this project, her soul, her time, her money. $400,000 of her own hard-earned money went into crafting an album she believed would change everything. She wasn't just the artist here, she was the decision-maker, the one in control of her sound. For months, she worked tirelessly, fine-tuning every detail, shaping every note. The album was complete, and Karen, filled with hope, believed this was the turning point in her career. But when Richard heard the first version, it wasn't what he had envisioned. He felt it didn't align with the image the public had come to love, and so a decision was made. The album would not be released. The official line was that it wasn't artistically sound or in line with the market's direction. Herb Alpert, as always, had the final say. The rejection was crushing. Karen, now a woman hardened by this setback, returned to performing with Richard, but something inside her had changed. She was quieter, more withdrawn. The sparkle that had once lit her up seemed dimmed. They spoke of her solo album again, and the project was buried in the archives, untouched for 13 long years. Then, in 1996, long after Karen's death, the world finally heard what they had missed. The album was released, simply titled Karen Carpenter, and it was nothing short of groundbreaking. Critics were stunned by the maturity in her voice, the emotional depth that had been so well hidden. Many said that had this album been released in 1980, it would have reshaped Karen's career and allowed her to step into a new phase of her artistry. It was, without a doubt, her last chance to show the world who she truly was, not just a voice, but an artist with her own vision. For those who had followed her from the very beginning, this album wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a powerful statement, a testament to her talent and determination. But even now, the mystery remains. Why was it held back? The industry, her family, and her label all failed to stand by her. It wasn't a betrayal per se, but a retreat into safety. And in the end, that retreat cost them more than they realized. It cost them trust. And Karen lost her chance to do it all for herself. Karen Carpenter passed away on February 4, 1983, at the age of 32. Her death, attributed to heart failure caused by toxicity from emetine, left the world reeling. Her body, worn down by years of struggles, could no longer keep up with the toll she had paid. But there was no visible sign of what had been happening beneath the surface. Her weight struggles had begun quietly, almost unnoticed. In the mid-1970s, as the Carpenters soared, Karen began obsessively controlling her weight. What started as a few pounds lost for concerts soon spiraled out of control. She took extreme measures, laxatives, diuretics, crash diets, and relentless exercise. Her life on the surface appeared perfect. But the truth was far more painful. The world may have only known Karen Carpenter as a voice of purity and grace. And in the end, the music industry, the very people who should have supported her, failed her when she needed them the most. Back in the late 70s, when Karen Carpenter was at the height of her fame, the world saw a star. But behind the scenes, a battle was raging that no one truly understood. The media had no grasp of eating disorders at the time, and Karen herself never admitted to having a problem. But they couldn't see that it was something far more sinister, a disease, not just a personal obsession. Karen's rapid weight loss didn't just change her physical appearance, it altered her image. And instead of concern, the public praised her slender figure, reinforcing Karen's belief that she was on the right track. But in reality, she was spiraling, and it wasn't until 1981, after persistent encouragement from friends and family, that Karen sought help. She visited Stephen Levin, a therapist in New York who specialized in eating disorders. The road to recovery was anything but smooth. Karen missed sessions and struggled to adhere to her recovery plan. But even then, Levin noticed progress. He saw a shift in her perception of food, a tiny flicker of hope. In 1982, Karen's body could no longer carry the weight of her secret. She was hospitalized in Los Angeles, suffering from severe fatigue. For 2 months, she was fed intravenously, slowly regaining strength and vitality. Her doctors believed she was on the mend, but her heart, worn out by years of malnutrition and medication, was beyond repair. No one knew just how much damage had been done until it was too late. There's still confusion over the exact details of her decline. Some of her closest people, including Stephen Levin and her family, denied any use of ipac syrup, a substance known to have fatal effects when abused. But tests showed emmetine the active ingredient in her system. Was she hiding it? No one can say for sure. The truth remains a mystery, one that was never fully uncovered. Karen's death on February 4, 1983, shook the world. For years, eating disorders had lurked in the shadows, almost unheard of in public discussions. But Karen's tragic passing brought anorexia nervosa into the spotlight. People began to look back at her career and realized what they had missed, not just her physical decline. A Carpenter Memorial Fund to support research and raise awareness about eating disorders. Karen's story became a powerful symbol, influencing medical research, documentaries, and educational programs. Her death changed the way the media and entertainment industries approached body image, particularly for women. Her impact stretched beyond music. Artists like Madonna, Sheryl Crow, and Alanis Morissette have spoken openly about how Karen's voice inspired them and how her story helped them understand the importance of mental health. Karen never wanted to be a symbol, yet her life and her death opened a door for greater public awareness. Herb Alpert, the man who first saw something in Karen, knew her better than most. He wasn't just the man who signed the Carpenters, he was someone who believed in her when no one else did. He helped guide them through the toughest times, even suggesting Close to You when they were struggling to find a hit. And while he was always in the background, his influence was undeniable. Karen had a quiet respect for him, an unspoken bond. Their final interaction came in late 1982, just weeks before her passing. She stopped by the A&M office, and when she entered the room, she smiled, her eyes bright and her hair done perfectly. She greeted Herb with a casual, "Hey Herbie, look at me. Are you okay?" Herb remembered that moment vividly. Karen seemed radiant, full of life. They chatted about future plans, and there was no sign of the pain she had been carrying. But 2 weeks later, the world was hit with the devastating news of her death. For years, Herb didn't speak publicly about Karen's decline. But in 2012, during a performance at Café Carlyle, he broke his silence. He paused, bowed his head, and then tears streamed down his face. In front of an audience, Herb simply said, "I miss her. I really miss her." His words, unadorned and raw, spoke volumes. It wasn't just a tribute, but an acknowledgement of the complex emotions he had carried for decades. And in March of 2025, as a 90-year-old Herb Alpert performed in Boston, he paused once more. He spoke about Karen, recalling that last meeting with her, how her smile had fooled him into thinking she was back to her old self. But the tragedy was that she wasn't. The sadness he felt wasn't just about losing someone close. It was the pain of not knowing what had really been happening behind the scenes. Herb's silence, which lasted for over 40 years, was his way of coping with something he couldn't fully understand. But in that moment of tribute, he finally acknowledged that the silence was part of the story. His quiet respect for Karen, the way he had carried her memory all these years, spoke louder than any words ever could. Karen Carpenter's life, her struggle, and her death left a lasting impact not just on music, but on the way we view mental health and eating disorders. Her story was one of strength, vulnerability, and a voice that could never be replaced. The distance between an artist striving for more and a body collapsing in silence wasn't long. In the blink of an eye, the world lost one of its most beautiful voices. Humble label, in a garage behind a house in Hollywood in 1962, founded by Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss. From the very beginning, Alpert created an environment that was different from the conventional music industry standards. His philosophy was simple: respect for the artist, the freedom to evolve, and the avoidance of boardroom pressures. This approach made A&M the perfect home for artists who didn't fit into the mainstream trends. Names like Carole King, Cat Stevens, Joe Cocker, The Police, and, of course, the Empire of the Carpenters. In 1969, Karen and Richard Carpenter sent a demo to A&M, and while most of the label's executives didn't see the potential, thinking the music was too light, too sweet, and lacking the punch of the rock and funk that dominated the era, Herb Alpert had a different vision. When he first heard Karen's voice, particularly on Your Wonderful Parade, he didn't just hear the music, he felt it. Without hesitation, he signed them. It was one of the most instinctive and successful decisions in the label's history. Alpert didn't directly produce their records, but he was always there, guiding, suggesting, and advising. He brought in professional musicians, helped shape the arrangements, and played a key role in their commercial success. One of his most notable contributions was his suggestion for They Long to Be Close to You, a song that became a chart-topping hit and cemented the Carpenters as national stars. But as the 70s wore on, A&M expanded rapidly. With hundreds of employees and an ever-growing roster of artists, the label's atmosphere began to shift. The original spirit of flexibility and freedom was replaced by commercial pressures. What had once been a place where artists could express themselves freely became a place where success had a specific formula, a formula that fit the soft, accessible image the Carpenters had become known for. It was a formula that Karen couldn't fit into when she decided to step out of the shadow of the Carpenters and pursue a solo album. Karen's solo project, which drew inspiration from disco and modern sounds, was a departure from the image A&M had worked so hard to cultivate. Her direct lyrics and more mature tone raised concerns within the label that the album would jeopardize the carefully constructed brand. Herb Alpert, who had once been her biggest supporter, found himself torn. The decision, ultimately, was not his alone, but he did have the final say. The album was rejected, and Karen's artistic aspirations were sidelined in favor of maintaining a marketable image. This marked the beginning of the end of Karen's trust in the system that had once nurtured her. A&M, once a close-knit family, had transformed into a corporate machine. As the company grew, artists lost their personal connection to the co-founders, and decisions were made through intermediaries. The label, which had once prided itself on fostering individuality, was now driven by the bottom line, and Karen's rejection became a symbol of that shift. For her, it wasn't just a professional setback, it was a personal betrayal. The environment she had once trusted no longer felt like a safe space, and the machine that had nurtured her now confined her. Despite the heartbreak, Karen's music lives on, still resonating with fans decades later. Songs like We've Only Just Begun, Superstar, and Rainy Days and Mondays continue to be beloved classics, especially around the holidays, untouched by remixes or modern arrangements. Karen's voice, rich and precise, remains an instrument of emotional depth, capable of connecting with listeners in a way that feels timeless. She may not have been known for high notes or flashy vocal runs, but her mastery lay in restraint, in the subtlety of every note and every pause. Her voice said exactly what she needed to, nothing more, nothing less. Karen's legacy has continued to grow since her death in 1983. Richard Carpenter has released previously unheard recordings, compilations, and behind-the-scenes material. Giving fans a deeper look into her work, the tapes that had been stored away in A&M's archives were restored, and the world began to realize that Karen had left behind more than anyone had ever imagined. Though Karen Carpenter is no longer here, her music remains as influential as ever. And sometimes it takes words spoken too late, like Herb Alpert's, to remind us of the value of truly listening before it's too late. Karen's story is one of music, yes, but also of a deeper lesson that's sometimes the most important. Thing we can do is give an artist the freedom to be themselves, to step outside the constraints of what's expected. Only then can we truly hear their voice. If you find this story worth remembering, please share the video to spread what should be recognized. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and continue joining us on these hidden musical journeys. We always want to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below.